Welcome to Buy It On BirchStreet, the show where we highlight the best of hospitality procurement software, the people behind the solutions, and how they save you valuable money and time. I'm your host, Gareth Fraser.
Our guest today is the Director of Business Development and Partnerships for Europe, the Middle East, and Africa, and Latin America, Custodio Barreiros. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Gareth. Good afternoon, good morning, good day, shall we say.
Hey, you're the first person we've had on Buy It On BirchStreet who said g'day and reminds all of our listeners that I'm from Australia. So you get the shiny star, Custodio Barreiros. Well done.
Well, no, we have to recognize our international colleagues wherever we are in this world.
Well, and that's why we're having this interview with you, because you are an international man of mystery, for those who haven't met him, but extremely well known in our field. Just for our listeners' benefit, Custodio has been in North America this year. He's traveled across the United Kingdom. He's been throughout Europe and the Middle East repetitiously, and he's been back there again most recently. So let's kick off, Custodio, by asking you, where did you just go and what event did you attend and why?
I would love to give you a story that I was forced to go to Riyadh to the Hotel Show Saudi, but no, I was very much kindly invited to attend the Hotel Show Saudi, which has become the largest trade event in the kingdom. It was brilliant to see the opportunity that our industry has within the region. The kingdom itself has got, how can we say, if I would say optimistic, but I would say realistic vision, the so-called Vision 2030 that's taking place right now. And reading about it is one thing, but when you land in Riyadh, you start seeing the building sites straight away, and you see automatically what is going to happen. So from driving around King Solomon's Park idea, what it will turn out to be the largest green area in the world, allegedly, to learning about the 100+ developments of hospitality taking place in the kingdom was brilliant. And that's what I went to do. So I spent last week there attending the show, meeting with suppliers, connecting with new management companies, which is always great to see that our industry doesn't just stay within the traditional brands. It's also there are the local brands. And also how the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is also, how can I say, they're ensuring that the heart of the country, the hospitality, the culture remains there, and that understanding takes place. So throughout the show itself, one of the greatest things I heard was about Saudization, which is, it's actually an official term known by the Saudi nationalization scheme, where it's a policy that they're implementing with the Ministry of Labor to ensure that every company adheres to they say a decent quote of Saudi nationals. But that means, to the surprise of most possibly listening to this podcast, is my Uber driver from the airport was actually a lady. So if I said that and I arrived in Saudi and a lady Uber driver, possibly everyone in the West will be surprising. But no, the country has very much changed and is changing, and it needs to change, of course, to welcome the new flow of tourism, business travel events that's taken place. And that's why I went to literally attend, to witness, to learn, and to make new connections.
You bring up the point of new connections, and there's just, since the COVID pandemic and our industry shut down, Custodio, and the revamping and so much activity in the region that you're involved with, You've also attended many of these events over the course of your career, and they've taken different formats. Can you share with the listeners today what the format of the hotel show was?
The great thing to see was a traditional show exhibition floor format. So from suppliers from all over the world, there were suppliers from Portugal, from the US, from China, from Europe, all exhibiting there. But the great thing was it had different seminars. I call them seminars because they weren't just your traditional 15-minute speech about something and the next comes on. The sessions were around seminars, educations of the region, how important it is for the suppliers, the contractors, the management companies coming into the region to understand the local culture, but also to understand about the funds available. The kingdom itself is not just trying to bring investment in, they're also assisting with their own investment. So the format of the event was your traditional, if we look at, let's say, a miniature high tech, but more for the supplier side from the buildings, constructions element, as well as technology. Don't get me wrong. There was a beautiful, and I say booth because as you know, and everyone who works with me and has met me in industry knows how much I love my food. They had local chefs demonstrating the local cuisine, which I very much enjoyed to see, different techniques. So they were showcasing from the operational side to the technology bringing in to also the buildings, really from scratch on how they bring in the hospitality vision together. And again, we had great sessions by industry leaders, worldwide industry leaders, included the United Nations World Tourism Organization was present, the local international hospitality university as well, with a dean from the UK. So it was a great mix of, how can we say, education and booths for everyone to benefit from.
Yeah, I sure appreciated you not only answering that question, but when you sent me a video for our listeners' benefit from the show floor of a band playing. There were you sitting in the audience, building these partnerships, multilingual. You speak a variety of languages, as was everyone did on the floor there. But it was unique to see that musical element brought in, which just reinforces, Custodio, the importance of appreciating culture and different countries. And you often talked about the importance of having a coffee in the Middle East. And if you don't like coffee and you're traveling to the Middle East, well, maybe drink decaf. But the important thing is the value of partnerships. And in your view, it's specific to your role. And if we were in the 80s, I'd say you have an extensive Rolodex, but we're not in the 80s. I have to now say you have an extensive contacts list. But Custodio, share with the listeners the value of the partnerships for us in the Middle East.
I think it's hard to put an exact figure. If we look at the Western way of looking at value, everyone's saying, how much? What's the figure? I think the potential is a lot greater and even underestimated at the moment. And I say this for a reason. You are very much correct, Gareth. The famous coffee a date, and there's not one booth that I went to without having to have the little espresso shot or the little shot of coffee, sweet tea at times, because there's only so much caffeine you can drink or should drink for health purposes. But the importance of having that connection with someone and dedicating that time to enjoy that coffee, that glass of water with someone. I say glass of water because there's one thing about trust and rapport building in our industry. As much as we're selling technology ourselves, as much as others were selling mini houses, mini pods, in fact, one of the providers that I met there for one of the groups, it's very key to understand that you have to understand the reasonings behind why an investor who's never put a cent, a dollar into hospitality is suddenly investing in this industry, the new currency for the kingdom. And then, of course, you have to think about potential. To give you an idea on projects, everyone thinks about Neom, Red Sea in the West, Roshin as the main three developments. They are correct. How about the other 90 plus developments and projects taking place that no one talks about? The kingdom is very key to tell everyone, and they say in a positive way, we're going to do this the right way. We've seen other regions sell their souls. We've seen everything. We want the international investors, however, but we want our own management companies as well. The reason why is they want to maintain a level of culture and a level of heart and warmth, the history that the region has. And I think that's something that every provider needs to understand. So as soon as you look at the value of partnerships and what you can do, we can't, however, just look at the traditionals, larger brands, the largest hotel groups in the world. We have to go beyond that. And that's the management companies, the local companies that are also going to be operating in the region. And how can we support them? Because one of the speeches and the first speeches I heard in the sessions is, we're here to welcome everyone. We understand that oil is no longer the number one currency in our region. Tourism is going to open our economy and data becomes the new oil. So the potential is therefore greater than most have realized, but suppliers have got to be ready to have the local knowledge and understanding, have those relationships built from day one, i.e. now from the first hotel show, and then of course start working with the local international brands and the local brands at the same time, because local management companies and local management hospitality brands are growing on a daily basis. In fact, I had a coffee, as you mentioned, with a former colleague of mine in London from Saudi roots. He's moved back home and he's managing a local brand. And the importance of the brand as a boutique brand to deliver the local culture is priority for them and for him. That's the main objective. Before they even go into anything else, they want to ensure that the Saudi service is seen, showcased, and multiplied. And that's across the country, not just Riyadh. So I think the potential for anyone is tremendous as long as you have that understanding when you go into the region.
Yeah, and to your point of going into the region, most of our listeners have not traveled to Saudi Arabia. And as our final question, I've thoroughly enjoyed the interview, Custodio, and it's a question that must be asked from a man who understands and appreciates the five senses given to a human being. Share with us what traveling to Saudi Arabia is really like. Sights, sounds, expectations, cultural appreciation. Most of us won't have that opportunity. Those of us in hospitality should have and take advantage of that, to your point. But bring us in on the man on the street, woman on the street view that we can appreciate what's going on in Saudi Arabia and what you experience when you're there as you travel.
So I think we need to understand one thing. Everyone will be possibly fearful of traveling to Saudi Arabia. I would say don't be. I was definitely pleasantly surprised that seeing that the change has already started and becoming more and more liberal for sure as an environment. They're stepping in the right direction. And I say in the right direction for a reason. For me, I never just go by the opinion and the feedback when we meet the owners of management companies, because obviously it's a different, how can we say, management level, seniority level we're dealing with. I like to speak to the Uber drivers. And when you see that Saudi Arabia has already welcomed Uber Kareem, that's where Kareem was born, which is a similar app to Uber, if anyone knows it from the region. You can travel the same as you travel in Dubai, in Miami. You get your app, location, off you go. As I mentioned at the beginning of the conversation, my Uber driver from the airport when I landed to the hotel was a lady already. So that's a change that many will not expect to hear. At the same time, the drivers that took me around, they became kind of tour guides. They were proud to showcase or what's taken place. This building site is going to be this building site is going to be that. We're going to have a park here where we can bring our families to local attractions. You've got the boulevard in Riyadh, which, to be fair, if you transponded there, you would be thinking you're anywhere in the West or Piccadilly Circus with all the lights, because you've got all the street food, everything's happening there, and so on. So there is that kind of mix at the moment of some of the more traditional culture, the modernization. Every single Uber driver who I met during my week there were proud to say that they're learning English because they can see the growth of the international travels arriving, from international sporting events to the events such as Hotel Show Saudi and others taking place. Every week there's something taking place right now in the kingdom. Plus, there is one thing we need to understand. Doesn't matter where we land, and you mentioned something at the beginning which very dear for your recognition when I said good day to you. Recognize that you're Australian, but I'm sure that when I arrive in Sydney, Melbourne, there is a respect. If I respect the local culture, if I understand the local behaviors, the same as if someone visits my home country or Portugal. And Saudi Arabia is exactly the same. We have to be due diligent when we go to a different culture. We need to respect that. Be willing to sit down for that coffee. Be willing to travel with the individual and learn from them and learn the local culture, enrich ourselves, because that'll enrich our own ways of doing business and growing as a company. The showcase of developments taking place are brilliant. And I say this for a reason. For such an optimistic vision that's taken place in the kingdom right now, I'm very much looking forward to seeing it being delivered. As there was in the Khalij times when I was there was Saudi Arabia to become the world's largest construction site because the goal is there and people are behind it. The local driver, the local chef is talking about it when he comes over to check if you're having a nice breakfast at his properties. There is a really care on customer service. It's taken place. So that's how it was when I was there. At the same time, yes, you do have local culture and you have some of the more traditional cultures, but the kingdom is bidding for FIFA 2030 World Cup, the soccer World Cup, football for us in Europe, as we call it. They really want to showcase what they have and to the world. it is a vision, and everyone is waiting to see if it comes to fruition. But from what I saw, the beginnings are very positive, and I'm hoping it'll carry on that way. And I say this for a reason, not for us as a company to make more business, not for our peers, our partners to make more business, but for the local people, because we have to think that if a region of the world enriches itself, it enriches everything else around it. The chef, the cook, the cleaner. And I think that's what hospitality is about. It opens those doors to the local people, even just to see, and I know it sounds mad for you and I to say this, where we come from and where we live, to see women driving and not being fearful of driving, and even as an Uber driver, I think that was already a massive positive for me. So some of the first impressions was my first time in a business visit to Riyadh. I was very impressed, and I'm looking forward to going back to see how it all comes along.
To BirchStreet Systems Director of Business Development and Partnerships, talk about his recent trip to the hotel show, Saudi Arabia, why he attended, the format of the event, and the value of the partnerships within the region. And then just finally sharing all of those wonderful and positive impressions of Saudi Arabia and the growth and development within the country, and more importantly for our listeners, within the hospitality vertical. Thank you so much for joining us today, Custodio Barreiros.
You're most welcome. Have a good weekend, everyone.
And thanks to you, our valuable listeners, for joining us today to learn more about the leader of powering hospitality, food and beverage enterprises with comprehensive P2P solutions. As the global leader of spend management solutions in the hospitality industry, with over 15,000 enterprises trusting BirchStreet Systems in 130 countries, subscribing to a network of suppliers of over 450,000. To learn more, visit BirchStreetSystems.com and click on the Suppliers tab. That's it for today's show. We'll see you next time right here on Buy It on BirchStreet.